What's up, you hackers? Welcome to the final episode for the Hypocrisy series. The Hypocrisy for INFPs. I thank you to all of you who are supporting what we're doing with this organization and for this movement. It's really incredible what all of you are doing. And I'm just very grateful. So thank you very much. I will admit, as an ENTP, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me to actually show or express gratitude, and it's just FI Trickster. FI Trickster really sucks at showing gratitude. Sometimes they show too much gratitude or too little. It's just kind of like I'm just a gratitude spaz, basically. So, but yeah, welcome to the show. Welcome to the final episode, and it's. This is probably going to be the hardest episode, at least for myself to do, because let's be honest, like INFPs are so behind the scenes and so difficult to spot sometimes that it's like difficult to even come to understand what their hypocrisy actually is and, why it matters, essentially. But, like I say for all these episodes, knowing someone's hypocrisy is extremely important. It's extremely important. The reason why I made a point of doing this series is because, obviously it's important for people to understand their own hypocrisy, but really it's actually to arm people with the understanding of the hypocrisy of other types. Because obviously, yeah, we have to live with ourselves, but we also have to live with people that are not ourselves. And oftentimes we find ourselves projecting ourselves and our own awarenesses on other people, right? So like, for example, an INFP would be really hurt about people talking shit about them behind their back, right? And then, so because they're so hurt by it, they hurt others in the same way by talking a lot of shit about people behind their back. This is known as cognitive projection. We've talked about it a lot. We have an episode devoted to it in season 18, and if not, then we definitely have an episode devoted to it in the Cutting Edge podcast here in the members area. It's really important. It's really integral because, it's one thing for human beings to be really focused on ourselves and our own personal growth, but sometimes we're responsible for the personal growth of other people in our lives. And obviously, as a mother or a father, those roles, you're responsible for personal growth. Sometimes in, romantic relationships, sexual relationships, you're also responsible to a degree for your significant other's personal growth. That could definitely be a thing. But honestly, there's so many other things. Like, if you're a man, you have like a group of friends, male friends, ultimately as a man, because men together are more affiliative, and that affiliative nature, because they have the broham, the bromance, the bro code, etc. It's their responsibility to make sure that their fellow men are growing, because honestly, that group of men is only as strong as their weakest link. And that's just an example of how outside of a familial situation, human beings are ultimately responsible for the personal growth of others. And one way that we do that is by calling each other out on each other's hypocrisies. Now, granted, if you were to read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's probably not a very wise thing to criticize people. And you can kind of tell that that's the case because of just kind of how people are, because even some of the biggest criminals in American history, none of them actually take responsibility for their actions. There's like, this guy who was like a serial killer, and he's like, wow, I'm here getting the electric chair because, for defending myself. He didn't even take responsibility for killing all those people, etc. And it's just because of our egos. Our egos are just not willing to let go of it. And then when people criticize us, the vast majority of us, at least 80% of humans, I imagine, that's just, an opinion, are just like really, really struggle with taking criticism. They just really, really struggle. And that is, by no means, limited to the INFP. I think the INFP is probably the most sensitive of the 16 types when it comes to taking criticism. They just really struggle taking criticism in a big way, like in a major fashion. It's horrifying to them. They're so scared. And then when they can't take it anymore, then they will start criticizing people, but they criticize others in this insanely demonic way, which just absolutely reduces the humanity of other people around them, to the point where they can almost arrogantly, with their ENFJ shadow pride, come to think of themselves as the only person worthy of criticism, or worthy to be criticizing others. Or to look at it this way, they themselves are the only person in that critical situation that is actually human. INFPs have this consistent problem where they demonize and dehumanize other people around them with their TI demon. They just take that humanity away, and their FI hero elects themselves the human in the room, while everyone else in the room is not human, and they end up being at risk of treating those people as non-humans. And welcome to ISTP superego. Like that's a thing. It sucks. It really, really sucks. And I've been victimized many times by ISTP superego. Especially like in my career, I had this one INFP secretary girl who, she did something morally wrong. She actually stole from the hospital that I was working at. Her name was Alicia. And I even went to her birthday. I went to her birthday party this one time, and it was so weird because, she was on the dance floor dancing with like men who were not even her husband. And I said something to one of my coworkers about that. I'm like, isn't that like unethical? Well, anyway, she got wind of what I said about her at her birthday, and from someone else that I worked with. And, as a result of that situation, she just completely went out of her way to destroy my reputation at work. Even to the point of some of the things that she was saying about me got to my boss's boss, and that actually inhibited me from getting a promotion. And it's one of the reasons why I couldn't work. I just didn't want to work at that hospital anymore, because my boss's boss got so upset. But then to go even further though, like my boss's boss is also trying to hide the fact that he was banging one of the girls on staff there as well, even though he was a married man with children, and then he had an illegitimate child with her on the side, which I'm not against that. Like, I'm not against that at all. It's his business, it's his life. But he thought I was condemning him for that because he was an INFJ and he's very sensitive, and he was having this affair with this ENFP woman at work who was also married as well. But her marriage, like, her husband was military. He's some ESTJ cuck, let's be honest, and like he was working like somewhere else on the other side of the country, etc. But the bottom line is that like they kind of like, I think they agreed that it's okay for her to see other people or whatever. But she ended up having a child with him, and last I heard they're still together and whatnot. I don't know. But they went out of their way to like hide that fact from everybody. But the INFJ got like super insecure and thought like I was gonna like expose or do something, all because of what this INFP was doing. So this INFJ just completely went out of his way to make my life miserable on the job, and that ultimately led me to quitting. So I wasn't working for the hospital conglomerate I was working for anymore. So like that's one of the like direct consequences, like of how INFPs can be so sensitive to criticism, even if they are guilty, but they're not going to take responsibility. Instead, they're typically just going to fight fire with fire, and you have to be aware of that risk, because no one can spin a web better than an INFP. This is why INFPs are often like editors of newspapers or major journalists, because they just understand public relations. They just understand how people work, because while ENFPs, or similar to INFPs, have in the absence of explanation or a voice or someone talking about things, then perceptions become reality. The thing is, though, is that INFPs can severely weaponize that concept. And through that weaponization, absolutely destroy people around them, and those other people have no clue it's even happening. One of the reasons why is because no one wants to make the INFP feel bad. And just how the INFP acts, they collect so much empathy from other people, and that collection of empathy gets other people on their side already. And whoever the target is of their public relations attack, their social engineering attack about destroying this other person's reputation, the damage is done, and it's already too late. People, their manipulation of the court of public opinion has already happened, right? And from the INFP's perspective, from her perspective, she was just defending herself from me, when really the punishment didn't match the crime. And she was doing something that I pointed out to someone that may be unethical at her own birthday party. But she took it so personally that she ended up, attempting to destroy my life in the process, which is pretty sad. But honestly, I forgive her. I understand. This is what INFPs do. And that's another reason why it's important to do these videos, so that you folks can get to a point where you could forgive people for their hypocrisy. You got to forgive them for these things. Because you have your own hypocrisies too that you have, and you always have the potential to go in that direction every single time as a person. You always do. And that's something you got to just really understand. This is why it's important to forgive other people. That's why it's important to be merciful to other people, because you just have to know this is how people act. This is normal, okay? And it really comes down to ego. It really comes down to the inferior function. The inferior function gets hurt, and if their parent function is underdeveloped to be able to properly defend and take care of their inferior function, then the demon function is going to come out and via cognitive orbit and protect the infant, basically, because no other function within their mind is actually really capable of doing it. You think the child's going to be able to do it? No. Do you think the hero even has time to help out the infant? No, it really doesn't. Okay, the hero is like a dad that's working. It's really supposed to be the motherly parent function that is supposed to, which is, the parent function is like kind of innately feminine, whereas the hero function is innately masculine to a point, if we're looking at individual functions, regardless of how everything else. But looking at the functional level, that's there. And the infant, it's like a little baby girl, screaming baby girl, and then, well, the demon's going to show up and protect the child. It's like the infant, basically, at that point, and manipulate the infant to its own gain, of course, because, you ever hear the meme or the trope of demon spawn? That's basically where it comes from, And it's no different for INFPs. It's no different. And when they hurt so easily over words, and they understand the power of words. It's so funny because they end up pairing up with STPs often, and STPs have the perspective that words are worthless, only actions matter. But the INFP is the complete opposite of that. To the INFP, words are everything. Actions don't mean that much. Words are everything. So you got to be really, really, really careful who you offend out there, and recognize that different types have these different proclivities, these different sensitivities, these different preferences, basically, when it comes to certain things. Like Templar types, they care more about actions, whereas philosopher types very much care a lot more about words. And then the ISTP probably cares about actions the most, with the INFP caring about words the most, right? So just because, you're an STP or whatever out there, or you're a TP type, when you use your TI function to criticize somebody, you better make sure you understand what type they are, because it will blow up in your face, And of course, there's people out there like Dale Carnegie, who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I'm rereading that book now, and I'm so glad I'm rereading it again, because it was definitely part of my prep for this particular lecture. Because chapter 1 says don't even bother criticizing anybody. What value is it? There really is no value. Sure, there's times when you want to criticize someone, like if you're in a parental relationship, maybe a significant other, or you're taking care of your bros, and yeah, there's definitely times where it's appropriate to criticize. But in almost, at least, 4 out of 5 times, it's probably not appropriate to criticize, especially when, a TP is the most likely of the 16 types to criticize somebody, right? They're the most likely to do it. You see what I'm saying? And because of that, they're the ones who will end up dealing with the most blowback when it comes to the battle of words, And that can be problematic for people. That could be very problematic for the TPs involved, and that can also be very problematic for the FPs, especially the INFP, the most sensitive of the 16 types to words, right? They're very, very sensitive. ISFPs, you could argue, are just as sensitive as INFPs, except the problem is that the ISFP doesn't have an SI function to store up past words being spoken over them. You see? They'll just forget about it. And then it won't even matter to them because those words have lost energy. And then, while they may try to destroy your reputation here and there, they'll peter out, they'll lose energy. It won't even matter or even be a priority to them anymore. It's not even a thing, not even at all. But the INFP, however, will store up within their soul forever. The INFP, especially given that they're a philosopher type, they have introverted sensing optimistic, they have FI optimistic, and then TE pessimistic. They have this huge scoreboard in their head where they are constantly keeping score of everything every single person has ever told them in their entire life. And that scoreboard is literally how they weigh people out in their life and value people. So the people who offer them praise, just like Dale Carnegie would say, be hearty in your approbation and lavish with your praise. The people who praise the INFP, even though it sounds entitled, are the people who end up getting more of their attention, who end up getting more of their special treatment, basically. And the people who criticize them are the people that they're willing to betray and sell downriver. And it's because of the sensitivity that they end up having the vice of treachery that we talk about in season 7 on the podcast or on the YouTube channel, right? The vice of treachery. Their virtue of loyalty versus the vice of treachery. And so they end up giving special treatment, that loyalty to the people that praise them. And then they end up giving hatred or indifference to the people, or treachery, straight up betraying the people that criticize them, right? So you got to be real. But here's the problem, though. And this is the first main hypocrisy I want to point out with INFPs. How the hell is an INFP ever going to grow if they can't take criticism? You see what I'm saying? So here's the thing. How do they grow? Well, how, me being an ENTP, I always talk about how I can't learn from other people's mistakes. Not only can an INFP not learn from other people's mistakes, they can't even really learn from a person's criticism. They really can't. The criticism of the INFP themselves would have to reach public opinion. It would literally have to be the public opinion of people around them in order for them to actually be willing to change at all. And it's very hard to actually get that public opinion because they're doing such a good PR job of managing everyone else's opinion about them, especially in the workplace or at church or any social situation or even in their families. They go out of their way to constantly manage the judgments of other people. This is why they're so behind the scenes. This is why they're so hard to find, basically. I mean, they're literally that barfly or that wallflower just sticking around. You don't even notice them because and this is why they don't go out, because it's stressful to them to have to manage the judgments of other people around them. But once they have enough strength and endurance to do so with their introverted sensing child, well, guess what? That's what's going to happen. And then they will manage other people's judgments constantly. Because in order to defend themselves, their sensitive infant function from, a potential PR scandal where people are thinking less of them, they have to go out of their way to manage all of the judgments of other people around them ahead of time. And they're constantly planting seeds and watering those seeds so that they build up enough clout, because it's the clout that they have that protects their inferior function from criticism. So, but the thing is, they also have TI demon. They're not going to learn from criticism. This is why they end up in sexual relationships with TI inferiors, because TI inferiors are afraid of criticizing people. And that's why they want to be around them, because they're not going to be criticized very often. It's just not really going to happen. So INFPs really struggle from learning from criticism. And it just becomes so hypocritical of them, because it's like, how are they ever going to change? How are they ever going to grow? So, like, I have TI parent. When someone criticizes me, I take that criticism, I learn. The first thing that comes to my mind, I ask myself, I was like, well, is this person right? Let's verify if they're right. And if they're right, I'll take full responsibility for it. I'll take full responsibility. But like, yeah, you're right. I did screw up. Yeah, you're right. I did fuck up. I'm sorry. My bad. I'll take responsibility, and I will immediately change. An INFP, are they going to do that? No. They're not going to accept the criticism. They're actually going to lash out from behind the scenes and work to destroy that reputation, or use that built-up clout they have with other people to belittle and demonize those other people around them. And that's pretty lame, but that's what happens. It happens all the time. And this really inhibits their own personal growth as people. They're not even actually able to grow. They're not actually able to, become better people from criticism. So instead, like, at least, I can't learn from other people's mistakes, but at least I can learn from criticism. But when it comes to INFPs, they don't get either. They don't get either. They can only learn through trial and error. And criticizing them, you're wasting your breath. So it's like, don't bother criticizing an INFP. It's not going to get anywhere for you. It's not going to do anything. It's not even really going to benefit them. The only thing you could do is just not have them around. Just stay away from them. When they're alone and wondering, well, why doesn't anyone want me, or, when they see that they're not picked, or when they see that, other people are getting praise over them, the envy that's pre-built within their NE parent function will start to grow, and then all of a sudden they're actually motivated to change at that point. Or if they're prevented from reaching a new level, like for example, if they were prevented to reach a promotion of some kind on the job, basically because of their reputation, etc., or because people think less of them or no one wants them because they're not able to take criticism, that'll happen naturally on its own. This is a very good example of karma, okay, which is literally nothing more than living with the consequences of your own actions, okay? That's what karma actually is. A lot of people say, whoa, I'm out there and I'm just fighting my demons. And I'm like, no, actually, you're not fighting your demons. You're fighting the direct consequences of your actions. That's actually what you're fighting. You're not actually fighting your demons. That's bullshit. Like, that's not even a thing. Like, it's not even a thing at all. So based on that, like, a lot of people just, they don't even realize that. They don't even realize that that's a thing. But yeah, that at the base level, as a foundation, is the main hypocrisy of an INFP. That can't take criticism, which inhibits their ability to learn. Yet they're very quick to criticize other people when their reputation is in question, which leads to another hypocrisy. You'll notice INFPs always trying to pull down other people to their level, kind of like with their ISTP superego, because they'll be like, well, why are you bagging on me for not performing properly? These other people aren't performing properly either. So are you going to get all of us in trouble? See, that's what INFPs do. They try to get everybody in trouble and not just themselves. They're constantly working to make sure that they are never singled out. Never. And they will use their ISTP superego to that end and try to drag everyone else down around them, much like crabs in a bucket, basically, so that to protect their little reputation. Because from their perspective, if I don't get to have a good reputation, nobody gets to have a good reputation then. Because I'm obviously the most human person here. I'm obviously the most valuable person here. I'm obviously the foundation of which everyone walks around here. And I'm obviously the only one that sees things coming before they happen. I'm the one providing warning. I'm the one who's steering the ship from behind the scenes. No one really knows that. I'm providing this additional structure with my ESTJ subconscious. I'm putting in all of this effort. So what about me? And they always make it about themselves every time, which is another hypocrisy of INFPs. They always make it about them. And that is also really, really frustrating when it happens. So you end up like, okay, well, what do you do? You know, damn, that's good. So it can be really frustrating. And because of this hypocrisy, INFPs, out of all the 16 types, take the longest to grow out of everyone. They absolutely take the absolute longest to grow. But once they do grow, when they are fully grown, no one is outgrown. No one can outgrow them, basically, because they're like this strong, mega strong oak tree that's just like able to take all the hits from the wind and the waves and anything the elements can send at it. That's why they are that Zen-like hermit floating above the water, as I've said before, levitating. When you throw a rock at them, they don't even move. They're still so deep in meditation, they don't even notice. You see what I'm saying? And that's literally how they work. But that hypocrisy can really inhibit their own personal growth. The only thing that you can do, challenging them is not going to help. Criticizing them is not going to help. It's really just staying away from them, discluding them, basically. That is what's going to help. Or exposing them to public opinion. So public opinion, exposing your criticisms, becomes the public opinion about them around them. That's how they'll change. But the problem is, even that's not always going to work. You know why? Because they probably have 6 months to a year of managing that public opinion ahead of time, that no one would ever believe that the cute little INFP would ever be capable of such XYZ evil. You see what I'm saying? Their reputation is they've already invested so much in their own reputation in the eyes of other people, it's not likely you're going to get anything out of that situation. And that can be really tough for people to swallow. Really tough. So keep that in mind. Like, really keep that in mind and understand that that's like a huge risk. A huge risk when dealing with INFPs. And if you're a parent of an INFP, when it comes to reputation, you better watch out. You better watch out. They are so treacherous. They will betray you. They will betray anyone when it comes to their reputation. Their reputation will always come first, every single time. But the thing is that it's not necessarily a bad thing. Let them have their reputation. Let them have it. Just because eventually, like that song, your guilty heart will find you out. People will eventually find out. You just have to be patient enough to let it happen. It doesn't benefit you if you're like a TP type or an STP to start, or even an NFJ, to start criticizing the INFP on their bad behavior. Like for example, I know an INFP who was physically abusive to his wife, for example, and she's trying to tell people about it, but no one ever believed he was. No one ever believed it. Not one time. It's pretty fucked up. And I told this woman, well, why don't you leave him then? That's the only thing that's going to work. Get away from him. Because then the fact that you've gotten away from him, people will start to talk. Well, why isn't she with him anymore? You see what I'm saying? It'll start to work out over time. And then his character will improve because people will start to form their own judgments of the INFP based on your actions of getting away from them, your actions of discluding them, your actions of not having anything to do with them anymore. The problem is that most people don't even realize that that's an option, especially in this day and age when we live in Western society where it's really hard to escape from abusive people in your life. It's extremely difficult. You always have to make sure that you have enough power within your own self to be able to get out of abusive situations. Always. You always need that power. And if you're not there giving yourself that power, well, that's on you. That's really on you. But you can have it. You can have that power. Just got to make sure you're always thinking ahead, because guess what? INFPs are always thinking ahead. They're constantly thinking ahead all the time. They're always aware of the possibility. Because here's the thing, like by default, the INFP, there's another hypocrisy, they assume everybody else is thinking about them. They assume that everyone else is talking about them in secret. They always assume. Why? Because they are always thinking about everybody all the time. They are always talking about everybody all the time. If they even allow themselves to be around other people and are capable of managing the judgments of other people, they can be pretty social for that reason. But it's really just them protecting their image, because their image is everything. You know, and INFPs oftentimes end up in positions of power, and you're going to say the wrong thing, or they're not in positions of power, they just know people who are in positions of power, who are within their little PR web, and you said the wrong thing to the wrong person like I did, and then you get screwed, right? And I said the wrong thing to the wrong person, and I got screwed. But then again, I wasn't working for the hospital anymore, and I practically doubled my wage at my new job. Most money I ever made in my life in terms of a 9-to-5 job. It was incredible. Destroyed my health in the process, but it was still incredible. Money was not a problem. So, you know, like, so just understand, like, there's some severe consequences when dealing with INFP hypocrisy. And really, the only way to deal with their hypocrisy is to flee. You guys ever hear the Bible verse, resist the devil and he will flee from you? Well, if the devil is the INFP, you need to flee from the INFP and get away from them completely. And then people in your social group will notice that you're not having anything to do with them anymore, and they'll start talking, and that'll really scare the INFP, and it'll cause the INFP to backtrack a little bit. It may even help the INFP develop some healthy character, because they'll realize, oh crap, my reputation's on the line now. I probably should be behaving a lot better than I have been. Maybe I shouldn't be so entitled. Maybe I shouldn't be so selfish. And that's really important. It's really, really important. Especially since if you do the opposite, you're just enabling the INFP. You end up enabling them. Here's the thing. A lot of TPs out there don't realize that if you criticize an INFP, okay, you're actually enabling them. And you're actually harming their character. They're not actually going to grow from that. They're not going to improve, okay? Because if you are going to criticize them, you have to criticize them in front of a lot of people and do maximum exposure and prove and make sure you are 100% right, and you can concretely prove, as STPs do, to a host of people, and ISTPs do it the best to INFPs. They're just the absolute best, because it's because they're their super ego, basically. And at that moment, all of a sudden, the INFP would be willing to change, but that's the only time that you can handle that criticism, because that you could use the criticism approach, because it's not so much criticism as much as it is you're exposing them. Only through exposure that you can actually get them to learn. But here's the thing, like, getting them changed, they're like this rock. They're not going to change. They're not going to change for anybody, because their comfort zone is everything to them. You know what I'm saying? The comfort zone is literally everything. And that's the thing, folks. Like, if you can get multiple people to say the same thing, the same criticism to the INFP, they might change. But the problem is, that's probably not going to happen, because if the NE parent of the INFP that you're talking to or talking about at that moment, if they sense that all those people are in cahoots with each other, well, they're not going to listen. They're not going to listen at all. So you just wasted your time. You practically just self-sabotage yourself because you criticize them. They're going to come after you. You know what I'm saying? So why bother? Like, seriously, why bother doing it? Like, you know, because, like, for example, if you get every member in your family to all criticize the INFP in an intervention and you're exposing them, the INFP would be like, well, you guys are all against me anyway, with their any parent. And then as a result of that, they're not going to bother paying attention anymore. They're just going to tune you out, and they're not going to change. And then when it's all done, they're going to work hard to destroy everyone's reputation anyway. So that was just a waste of breath. You literally just wasted your time. Congratulations. You played yourself. And then afterwards, they start playing these subtle games. Here's another hypocrisy they do. Here's the subtle game they play. They'll start making arbitrary rules for other people in their life to follow, basically. And INFP women are especially skilled with arbitrary rules. Because they'll have like certain men that they're dating. They'll date one guy, they'll date another guy, and they'll have different sets of rules of how each of these different guys will behave towards them. And each of those rules fits their specific comfort zone for each of these different men that they're having a sexual relationship with. Even though the men aren't necessarily aware of that, of that simultaneous sexual relationship situation, because obviously, she's being hypergamous at that moment. But, well, I mean, she's hypergamous all the time, but like the point is like, but even the women who are like serial monogamous, where they go from one man to another, one at a time, like they'll have different sets of rules for each of those men. You see what I'm saying? So it ends up just becoming a crock of shit anyway. It's hilarious to watch. And a lot of people are completely unaware of this dynamic because of just how subtle and how cute they are and how they just don't even realize it. But it's more like, do as I say, not as I do. But it's like, hey, I made a set of rules for you and I made a set of rules for you, but that doesn't mean I have to follow any of these rules unless they benefit me, right? And so they'll subtly move the goalpost over time, and they'll talk to other people and set a goalpost with these two people here at work, and then they'll go to these other two coworkers and say this other thing with these other coworkers over here, and it just becomes like this different thing over and over, and you can never really figure out what is actually important to the INFP because they've given a different set of rules or they've given a different story to different people that are within their social circle. You never really know where they stand, right? Because they're so subtle, they're so hidden and clinging to the shadows, right? You gotta watch out. That's where they ultimately manipulate people. That's how they do it. And then but if you really need the INFP in good graces, you just shower them with praise. Give them lots of praise. But the praise, too, could also enable them, and yet that's another hypocrisy. It's like, hey, as long as everyone thinks I'm good, I don't necessarily have to be good, because everyone thinks I'm good, and it's easier. It's so much easier. This is how INFPs take the easy route in life, by making sure that everyone around them thinks that they're a good person. They don't actually have to go to the real effort of being good, right? And you criticize them for that, they're not going to learn. They're just going to keep doing easy street because easy street is the only thing that matters to them because it's easy. They're that lazy. So be careful. Be careful of that. That's why you need to take a lesson out of chapter 1 from How to Win Friends and Influence People. That chapter, don't criticize people, applies to TE inferior the most. The only way you could ever get away with criticizing them is if you're exposing them to a lot of people, which destroys their public image within that social circle, and they have to rebuild so that they're forced to be good, actually good, at that moment. And they have to feel the full force of those consequences, those social consequences. But getting them to even show up to be exposed, that's super hard. It's not going to happen. That's not normal. That's not a thing. You see what I'm saying? It's not going to, you think they're going to leave their home? You know what I mean? It's not going to happen, Think about it. No one understands social power games more than an INFP. Perfect example of this would be Robert Greene. He's an INFP. He wrote the 48 Laws of Power. He wrote the 33 Strategies of War. He wrote The Art of Seduction. He wrote the 50th Law, The Laws of Human Nature. Some of the greatest books on human behavior and behavioral psychology ever written in the history of mankind, to the point where these books are even banned from prisons because they're just that vital to behavioral psychology and giving people a social edge when it comes to power. Because all power really is basically the influence that can be exerted upon other human beings to motivate them to do something to your benefit, basically. That's all it is. And they understand that. They don't have to be the alpha with a whip to force people through force and exercise power that way. They exercise their power through influence. It's easier, it's safer, it's subtle. No one can see it coming and they know it. And that's why you have an INFP, Robert Greene, writing all about it in the 48 Laws of Power. Because he understands it. That's how he lives his life. That's why it appeals to him. And all INFPs understand these social power games. They all understand it. They can't live without them. They have to have them in order to actually function. They have to have them in order to be sane. So don't judge INFPs. I want you to understand them. They're just trying to protect their inferior. Now, I'm not saying that, using these power games for evil, is justified. I'm not saying that. But I am saying you need to understand why they do it. It's really because they're inferior function. They just so desperately want people to think highly of them. They so want the status. They want the respect. They crave that respect. They crave that status. And if they've done something, offer them the positive reinforcement, offer them the accolades or the status or the rewards for them actually being a good person. Do that. That's the thing about parents of INFPs. They don't really understand that that's what INFP children need, because INFPs have that internal scoreboard, right? And if they know that they've been a good person around you, but they never got the rewards, the mental ego reward benefit from you after they were a good person around you, why should they continue to put in that much effort and that much investment into you? Maybe you're the one that's actually being entitled first, right? And trust me, I know STPs can be entitled. I know NFJs can be entitled. I know FE users can be entitled. And oftentimes, the FE users who are entitled are the ones that don't even realize they're being entitled, and they end up creating entitlement within the FI heroes. And then because they have SI child, if they're an INFP, they can't shake that entitlement when it's their ISTP superego that started to mirror your entitlement all along. Yeah. You created a monster as a parent or as a spouse, right? Maybe it's actually on you. Maybe they're just responding to you. Maybe they weren't just entitled to begin with. Have you ever thought about that, folks? Have you ever thought how you might actually be contributing to the problem? There's some really good INFPs out there. Very capable INFPs. Very good people who I respect, who I know, who I love, who I care about. And they're very good people. They're amazing. And I often praise them. But the situation is that you yourself have to make sure that you aren't being entitled. Because no one understands entitlement more than they do. Do you know why? Because they're FI hero, because FI is the investment function. They understand who they are investing in. They understand who they're putting their own effort in because they have integrated sensing. It is the effort function, okay? So you have the investment function, FI, the effort function, SI, combined together, and that create a lot of, attention, a lot of special treatment that they give to someone else. And you're being what? Are you taking that INFP for granted? Huh? Are you? Because if you take them for granted, they're going to defend themselves with entitlement, okay? Yeah. And then all of a sudden the hypocrisies come out. And you STPs and NFJs, you guys get entitled first, and then they become entitled because they're essentially mirroring or mimicking your entitlement with their ISTP superego, mimicking it with their INFP ego, and then you criticize them after the fact when it was you first who were entitled to begin with, huh? Did you know that you were actually creating a monster? Or is it because you're so external as Templars that you can't even realize how entitled you yourselves are, how hypocritical you yourselves are as Templars, and that you're the one that literally caused the INFP in your life to become so entitled that they become entitled to other people's bodies because you put them up to it with your own entitlement, because you couldn't take your own advice? Pathetic. Disgusting. Gross. As much as you criticize INFPs for being entitled, make sure you look at yourself first. Why else do you think Jesus, an INFJ, a Templar, literally said, before you point out the speck in your brother's eye, you might want to take the tree out of your own eye first? It's really important, because INFPs are constantly keeping score. And you Templars forget everything so much that you don't even realize that you have a scoreboard against you. And all it is, the INFP entitlement, INFP treachery, if you really actually think about it, it's a defense mechanism. Actually, it's a defense mechanism. Their hypocrisy is actually based on a defense mechanism. Okay? And now, granted, I could say that for a lot of the 16 types, but it's especially true for INFPs. Especially true. Please be aware of what you're doing. Please be aware of what you're doing to these people. It's not fair to them. It's wrong. You gotta understand. You really, really have to understand the consequences of your guys' actions. You really do. Because your entitlement is, in effect, victimizing INFPs. And it is a form of abuse. When a Templar type, for example, even a Crusader, but especially Templars, when they get entitled with their philosopher sides of their mind, basically, because they're an unconscious, wow. When that happens, holy smokes. Those INFPs are paying attention to you. They pay a lot of attention, and then they consent, they're unaware of the fact that it's actually a form of abuse coming from you, the Templar, okay? But they're not going to categorize it as abuse. They're just going to defend themselves because they don't like it with their own entitlement. Because it's like, hey, someone's got to watch out for number one, because obviously this Templar isn't doing it. You see what I'm saying, folks? You got to understand, yes, hypocrisy is a bad thing, but you got to understand what's the cause. And I would guess that 7, 8 out of 10 times, an entitled INFP is really an INFP victim who is using their entitlement defense mechanism, and then all of a sudden they've become this corrupt, evil person who is full of venom and bitterness, and the venom needs to be sucked out of the wound. And who put the venom there? Well, maybe you did. Okay? It's not to say that INFPs are not responsible for their own actions. That's not to say that, INFPs shouldn't be held accountable for when they use these hypocrisies for great evil, because they can, because they understand these social power games, they understand manipulation so well, they understand public relations so well, they understand the power of words and the power of reputation, they understand power itself so well. But the reality of the situation is that they were likely first victims themselves. Maybe y'all should have mercy on them. Maybe y'all should be there and be like, hey, it may not actually be their fault, or it used to not be their fault. Yes, you still have to hold them responsible. You still have to hold them accountable. But how much of you yourself actually pushed them to that point? Hold INFPs responsible, but you need to recognize for yourself, did I contribute to their entitlement? Are they actually using it as a defense mechanism, or are they actually just evil? Really spend time thinking about what is actually going on. What is the source, the why behind their entitlement? What is the source and the why behind their manipulation? Do you have anything to do with it? Or is it a situation where you're so right, you're wrong? You see what I'm saying? That's the problem. Be careful when you're criticizing people. Be careful. You never know, you might create an abuser through your criticism. Your criticism should either be fair, correct, presented properly, but here's the thing, an INFP is not going to take that criticism anyway, so why bother criticizing them? Instead, do what the Apostle Paul says in the New Testament, in the Bible. It says, expel the immoral brother. Meaning, get them out of your life. This is why INFJs door slam people, because it's the only thing they can do. Door slam the INFPs who are behaving this way. Criticizing them is not going to help. It's going to make it worse. So just door slam them. And say it like this: don't talk to me again until you get your shit together. It's not hard. That's it. And then people will start to have their own public opinions about the INFP because you're not having anything to do with them anymore. And if you're actually a good person, you have a decent reputation, they'll consider that it may actually have some weight. But if you're going around criticizing the INFP, it's not going to help. It's just going to blow up in your face. Words have power, folks, and INFPs understand that better than anybody. What value is it, huh? What value is it, Templars? What value is it, Crusaders? God damn. Maybe I should be taking my own advice. You know what I'm saying, folks? Maybe I should. That's enough smoking for this evening. So yeah, understand the truth. Understand that, oftentimes, everyone's so quick to point the finger at everybody else, but they're seldom willing to point the finger at themselves. INFPs, they won't point the finger at themselves until you point the finger at yourself. That's just how they work. They're practically immune to criticism. It does nothing. It does nothing to TID, and it's a waste of time. Be careful. Be very careful what you do. Criticizing an INFP, you may have just destroyed your own future. Can you think about that for a second? Instead, door slam them and let them come to you and take responsibility, because you are holding them accountable when you door slam them. You see what I'm saying? That's the reality of the situation. That's the truth, folks. And oftentimes that's why they're hypocrites. That's why they have their hypocrisy. It's because they're just trying to defend themselves. You see what I'm saying? But they get so used to defending themselves from abuse with these hypocritical defense mechanisms that they have, that they themselves become the abuser, because defending themselves becomes a habit and the abuse becomes a habit. How did that habit get there in the first place? Ask yourselves that question, especially you parents of INFPs out there. You might want to think about that. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Criticism to an INFP is basically like garbage in. You might want to watch out. You might want to watch out. Sure, if you're a daddy, yeah, you could criticize, but just understand you might be the only person who has the ability to criticize them because you are their father. You see what I'm saying, folks? This is why oftentimes FE heroes believe that they think that they have to earn the right to speak in other people's lives first and build a bunch of rapport with the FPs out there, especially INFPs, to earn the right to criticize. And even when they do criticize, they do it softly, gently, and not very often. You see what I'm saying, folks? Oftentimes, instead, they just, as Paul says, expel the immoral brother. and let the INFP come to them, because the INFP will notice all of a sudden, oh, I'm not wanted anymore. I wonder why. See what I'm saying, folks? That's a more efficient way. That's a better way. That's how you have a much better relationship with an INFP in the midst of their hypocrisy. And that is how you actually prevent them from being hypocritical. Okay? Like, stop criticizing and start understanding, folks. And it's not like the INFP even trusts you enough to even tell you what's actually happening anyway. You see? That's the difference. That's the meaning. That's what they're looking for. That's what they need in their life. If you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, please leave a comment below. I hope you guys enjoyed this season finale for the Hypocrisy series here in the premium lectures. Thank you all so much for being our paid subscribers here in the members area, in the Journeyman membership, and the Acolytes as well. I love you all. I'm very appreciative of you guys, and we're going to keep kicking ass and making amazing software and producing content to help you all improve your lives over time and just be better people, so that we can actually have a future together, a good one, so that our children can have a good future. That's my hope. That's my desire. So anyway, folks, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.